Jinguwala everyone, my name is Larissa Baldwin-Roberts and I'm a Widjabul Waiable woman. So grew up, for people that maybe don't know, on the east coast of Australia, on Bundjalung country up in the Northern Rivers, and I now live on Yagara and Turrbal country up in Brisbane. I head up an organisation called Common Threads, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. But I first wanted to start with, I guess, a kind of acknowledgement of country, what we do as First Peoples, but acknowledging that yesterday there was a big protest outside of this space by the local Indigenous people of the Parra region. And I just want to lift up that these are local people that are not invited into this space, and as Indigenous peoples we need to hold space, and it's not about who's in the blue zone and the green zone. We need to make sure that their voices come into this space. And they were protesting yesterday about the privatisation of their water, the mining of their country and the killing of their people, and saying this is about life or death for them. So in a space where we come together, the world's third largest gathering every year, to talk about how we move forward around this climate crisis, understanding for many regions across this place, this is life or death. And for this region, there are thousands of Indigenous people from this region that are outside these doors, and I just want to acknowledge them and acknowledge that we're on their territory, but also lifting up that protest absolutely has a place, a very important place within this multilateral system. And we wouldn't be where we are with ambition if it wasn't for communities protesting. So I hope that, we stand in solidarity with them, but I hope just putting the word out there to other people to stand up for the Indigenous people and what they were trying to say yesterday, and make sure, because I know that a lot of the media that's out there right now is saying that very negative things about them, but actually to lift up their message and what is actually happening in their region. So I'm going to get started and just introduce this incredible panel, introduce themselves. Who wants to start?
Jingila, Elige, Nenale Bundjalung, Jandaminda, Garamagaliban, Nalanga, Amazon Jogan, Jandaminda, Garamagaliban, Nalanga Gung, Weber, Biddy Buddy, and Jogan. Just introducing myself, my name is Ella. I'm from the Bundjalung country, northern New South Wales, and paying my acknowledgements to the country that we're currently on, and extending those respects out to the waters, the wind and the fire and the earth, the elements that we should be protecting, all of us.
Yama everyone, I'm Polly Cutmore. I'm from Gamilaroi and Anawan country in northern New South Wales, where the Great Artesian Basin is. That's where I come from, out in the plains of the northern basin of the Murray-Darling Basin. So I'll just pass it on and I'll talk more after. Thank you.
Kapukaiga mura nguzinel Barbara, ngai guda malulaig, saibai laig nguzu totem saibai kudal. I'm from the Torres Strait Islands, acknowledging the local people from here, traditional owners of the Amazon. And yeah, Torres Strait Islands in the top of Australia, tip of Queensland there. Thank you.
Ginnigan Yara, Nyam Amber Rose, Nyam Gumbangi Nyami. I'm from Lismore, I live in Melbourne, and I'm really excited to be on this panel with everyone.
Thank you. So this idea, maybe people have heard of NDCs or National Determined Contributions before. Is this blowing into the mic? Yeah. So for us, this is an idea that's come up in a lot of spaces where we have particularly large OECD countries that are definitely part of contributing to the climate crisis in terms of the export and burning of fossil fuels, and Australia is absolutely part of that. And we know that just this year, most states within this process have released in September their nationally determined contributions, or the commitments that they're going to make to reduce global warming in line with 1.5 degree target, and all the types of things that they'll do in terms of adaptation and mitigation. This idea around Indigenous NDCs comes from actually our brothers and sisters our relatives over in Canada, and this idea that there is more that we can do in terms of getting to 1.5 if states actually work with Indigenous peoples and Indigenous knowledges. And so as Common Threads is a justice initiative, we focus on climate and country and treaties. But we've been yarning around the country for the last 18 months, and we're continuing to do that. And so I guess what we're going to replicate here is a little bit of like how that yarn and those ideas are coming together. But we know that Australia's national determined contributions, or the NDCs, are not going to get us to 1.5. And so our call to the Australian government is not just to work with Indigenous peoples and our knowledges, but also understand, like, the Answer Is Us campaign is actually a campaign that comes from Indigenous peoples in this region, and their invitation over the last year was for other Indigenous peoples to take on that campaign and call on their governments to work more, not just in terms of investment with Indigenous peoples, but also the unfinished business of Indigenous rights. Like, how are we making sure that our rights are respected and recognised within this process? This is outside the rule book of the UNFCCC, but there is more work that the Australian governments can do, and many governments across the world. So we know that the reforms around our legislation around cultural heritage protection need to happen. We know there's incredible work happening from people working on country with fire. We know that the work that's happening across water requires more legislation, more access for communities. So basically we're starting off this conversation around, I guess it's a taster of the breadth of the conversation we have across country, and hopefully you leave with some different knowledges. But I'm going to start with you first, Auntie Polly. So can you speak to the water sovereignty and the fight that your community has been going through? We know that Santos has been in your community and that you don't consent to fracking, but we had a conversation about what we can learn from the waterways, and I think for you, like, bringing that story together and has been such an incredible advocate of that. But just talk a little bit about your story and the way that you see particularly the protection of water and country within your region.
Where I come from, Yama everyone, where I come from, we are the custodians of the Great Artesian Basin. But I'm also on the government water buyback program, and that is with the Murray-Darling Basin. The Murray-Darling Basin starts up in many countries, but it's linked to Queensland, New South Wales, South Australia, Canberra and Victoria. And that's really our veins of our country. Our veins of our country. Sorry about that. Yeah, so the Murray-Darling Basin covers 5 states? Yeah, 5 states and 1 territory. So, I'm on the chair with that, and we've just brought water back for our river, and what's happened there is that our water has been put more or less on the market, and that's been without our knowledge. There is more politicians that owns water than First Nation people in our country. Shame. And it's really disgusting. In 2019, we've had big droughts out there where there was no water, and we lost 300-year-old fish, our ancient fish, our grandfathers and grandmothers of those. And this is what's going on because we have the cotton coming there too with the mining companies. And that is a big strain on our waterways. So much so that only 100 kilometres down the road from where my country is, in Moree, and our groundwater, Narrabri, is at the moment cannot drink their water because of the mining that's going on there from Whitehaven. Thank you. From Whitehaven, with this toxic poison that's coming in there. So now they have to go down into our sacred river, the groundwater, to get water there for them to drink that's not contaminated. And that's how sacred our river is, that groundwater is. Because in times of ice age, floods and droughts, that's the only thing that sustains us and our country is our groundwater. And it's under attack from industries, cotton and mining. And it has to stop in our country because it is destroying our country out, but also turning our rivers and waterways into irrigation channels. And it's really, really bad. We have to stop it, what's going on, and we do really need to declare our waterways as commodities with us, human beings with us. So that's really what we need to do, especially with our Murray-Darling Basin. That's what's happening at the moment. I just need some water and I'll have a break.
Might hand over to her.
Very hot.
It is hot. Hand over to Auntie Barb. I'm not going to take your big news from you, but can you tell us a little bit about the climate case that's happening up in the Torres Strait? But also just more context around what's happening within advocacy around your islands as well right now.
Kumeso, thank you. In the last 24 hours or so, back in Australia, plaintiffs from the Australian climate case, Uncle Pabai Pabai and Uncle Paul Kabai, have lodged with the federal court, the full court, papers to continue with an appeal on the landmark case. We got defeated. It was a landmark defeat in Australia in July for the two uncles. But I'll tell you what, the community was invigorated and empowered to just return back to our island homes to continue the journey up through the court system. That court case is essentially about duty of care from our government to us. And so although it looked like it was a defeat, what it did was it highlighted to not only Torres Strait Islanders, but to the rest of Australia that the Australian government does not have a duty of care as far as climate harm is concerned. So quite pivotal and important to continue. And so that's in the legal space. What we're finding, obviously, is that the journey is much broader than that. We don't have political power. We don't have any economic power. We're a tiny island. If Australia was a house, we live out the back door. But I tell you what, we do have a voice, and we're going to try and stretch that voice as far as we can. In the last several hours, last several years, our elders on country have put out a call to action for whoever can come home to try and walk together on country for the preservation of our sinking islands. And so the advocacy work is going to continue. I've just in the last 6 months begun a concept for a new organisation specifically in the Torres Strait for the Torres Strait issue to specialise in Torres Strait climate advocacy action to support elders in their walk. So that's the announcement. More to come. I need money. It's just me. I'm one staff member, one man canoe. But hey, it starts with one. Let's build this ship.
Can I just ask you just a follow-up question as well? So I know that a lot of people see investment come in for seawalls, but can you talk about a little bit about more the intangible stuff that also needs to be funded across the islands?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
the state of investment.
Very, very important question. Thanks for that. So just recently, I believe $77 million has just been announced by the government for seawall infrastructure, I think water systems and stuff. That is all fine, well and good. But we're people who belong to country and who want to be able to work and advise from the ground, from the space of impact, about how we can live in impact using traditional knowledge. We intimately know how our waterways and our seaways and our land lives and breathes every day. Forever and a day, it feels like it's just man-made construction mitigation like seawalls. But the earth can heal itself. Islands can heal itself. We have land, we have sea that can be rebuilt through nature if we were to connect through those spaces. So in addition to that, in addition to a lot of other things, one of the big things is I like to always point out this part about what we're experiencing in the Torres Strait is a slow burn crisis. Every other situation that we come across, like we see the floods and the fires and the cyclones, all as catastrophic as each other. And my heart goes out to all of them, especially people in places like Lismore. We went and visited them towards the end of last year just to show solidarity. The two uncles came down and sat with people there and just wanted to learn intimately about what they're going through. Lost my train of thought, but Lismore's a great place. So where I'm going, it's a slow burning trauma, and one thing that we're not looking at is this thing about, I know, I'm fired up. I'm sweating, is climate harm well-being. My people are sitting, we've been told, or my elders are saying, we're packing our bags, we're packing everything we can, because in about 2 decades, we're going to have to cut the cord, our umbilical cord, and leave and never come back in these same little canoes that we're trying to paddle out into the middle of the ocean to find others to help us, because we've pretty much gone unnoticed. So we have to make a noise. But climate well-being throughout this country, like we're not separate from others in the country in the trauma, but we've got to be looking at that. We are suffering. It's getting hotter. Our marine biodiversity is changing. Pests and diseases. The Australian, by virtue of where we lie in Australia, we're interface an international border with Papua New Guinea. We are a biodiversity, biosecurity hotspot. We are looking after that spot right now. There's all that farming land, all the agriculture and stuff we do. Stuff gets picked up in our biosecurity zone. There's a special zone in the Torres Strait specifically for that. And so it's only going to get worse. Human-borne, animal-borne, plant-borne, from all this heat. So it's a huge, complex ecosystem that's being disrupted and a lot of work to do. And I think Torres Strait deserves its own brand of organisation specialising in what we do, and to sit with other organisations on the mainland with our Aboriginal brothers and sisters, because it's just time.
Absolutely. Thank you. Head over to Ella next. So the place that I grew up in, you grew up in, is probably most known across Australia for the devastating floods and fires that have happened. I think one thing that I'm not surprised by, but maybe is not lifted up, is the amount of resilience that comes from communities, and not in terms of resilience, but actually how community takes care of communities during disasters and actually are the front line of defence. So I wanted you to reflect on a little bit about that, but also beyond disasters, which is the way that people see our regions. Like, you're very interested in doing the work around food sovereignty and land back, and understanding, like, why is that a solution and that you're proposing in a region that is devastated by floods and fires?
Tingila. In 2022, the Northern Rivers region, Bunjalung, got hit with the largest colonial flood, and then less than a month later, we got hit with the second biggest colonial flood that had happened. A little backstory on this, Lismore, where the colonisers and settlers came to set up that town, were told by our ancestors not to develop there because it was floodplains. This happens all over my nation. We are telling people not to develop because there are wetlands and floodplains that government, local, state and federal, are pushing past with developers, and this is putting not just blackfellas in tricky situations, but all of our population, and the government really needs to listen to us because we know country, and country moves, and if there are places like where we're from, which is the tropic, on the tropic border, where we get heavy and big rain, we need to be returning to Indigenous leaders and systems that know exactly how to operate there. So in 2022, we set up the largest flood hub run by the Koori Mail, and I was a key volunteer in that space alongside a lot of Bunjalung volunteers. We were the only Indigenous-led flood hub in the Northern Rivers, and we serviced well over 5,000 people. We had our flood hub open for 18 months. First 6 months, we had no government funding whatsoever, and every single one of us was there day in and night, supporting our communities and ensuring that we could rebuild them. Why I think it is so important that we look at land back and food sovereignty is because then everything is connected. The reason that we are getting big floods and fires is because we don't have Indigenous people in communities looking after country. It's not good enough to give us land that we can't build on. That is not the Indigenous way of being. You can give us land that's supposed to be conserved, but that's not going to protect it. We're custodians. Country doesn't work unless we are in there interacting with it. We saw in COVID how the food systems completely failed us in Australia. We live on the other side of the planet, okay? And we are getting food that is coming from the Northern Hemisphere. Food security is one of the biggest things that we need to do to support not just Indigenous communities, but all communities in our country. And one of my biggest initiatives is getting women back into the country to ensure that we are the custodians of food security so that we can support our young ones. Not only that, it's intrinsically linked to our health. Indigenous people are disenfranchised because we live in an economic system that creates policies for the majority and we are the minority. You look across rural and remote communities all across Australia, and the food that they are given and the prices they have to pay for that is not good enough. And so if we can get land back where we can be self-determined to build, to grow our food, to also have our own education systems for our children that are not embedded in the Western colonial systems, then this is how Australia will be able to lead with a massive climate solution.
Amber, Dr. Amber Rose, is an expert in the Western system, but also has looked at a lot of Indigenous knowledges and looking at climate and health. And I'm not going to ask you to talk about your whole PhD, but what's important here for people to understand about climate action and well-being?
Okay, climate action and well-being. I'm going to reference, so in Australia's nationally determined, in their NDC, it mentions that the primary vehicle for climate and health in Australia, the framework that's guiding our responses between this nexus, is the Climate and Health National Strategy, or the National Climate and Health Strategy, which was released in Dubai at COP28 on the 3rd of December. So that strategy, it's in my thesis. I won't talk about the whole thing, but the way it frames us as First Nations peoples is it's very participatory, it's dissected and shallow. When it does refer to us, it's always referring to us about our knowledges. Our knowledges come from our relationship to our lands, our waters, our kin, our stars, our wind, each other, our soil, our microbes. The knowledges come from an even deeper relationship. And so what the framing of Indigenous knowledges are important does is it allows government and these multilateral spaces to extract what they want from us and then apply it to suit their own agenda. The carbon markets and nature repair markets are a classic example of this. I don't want to dismiss the entirety of it, because I think it could function in a way that, if led by blackfellas, if led by Indigenous peoples, could reform and reshape how these markets function. There is a role for them, but they have to be done in the right way. So I'm just going to quickly read because, it was a long process. Only a sentence, don't worry. But the framing of, knowledges are important. I wrote this is about the strategy. This service-oriented framing positions country as capital, resources to be accounted for, managed, and leveraged, rather than as kin. As a result, the relationships between parts of country are acknowledged only insofar as they contribute to human outcomes, rather than being respected in their own right. Country has rights, water has rights, plant has rights, and it's our job as Aboriginal people to understand what those rights are and to protect it with our life. Okay, I didn't write that bit, but it took me away. This reinforces a colonial environmental logic and fails to uphold Indigenous understandings of country as a living relational system. If we don't address the deeper work, if we don't address that climate crises are symptomatic of greed and power and corruption, we will continue to be in this mess. We will continue to come to these conferences, and change will not occur at the pace and integrity that it needs to. So we need to just update that whole strategy. Blackfellas need to be leading it, and government needs to listen and know that when you empower and protect Indigenous peoples, you empower and protect the solutions and our rights to life for the future.
Thank you. So I want to say what's not in the NDCs is actually, and as a position, is that we do need to see a phase out of fossil fuels within Australia. We are the largest exporter of coal and gas. Just because we are sending it overseas to be burnt, it is still doing the damage to our climate, and our government needs to get right with that. In terms of the work that we see, we've had lots of conversation around this, but in spaces like this, we carve up climate action into adaptation, mitigation, so stopping fossil fuels and the worst of what's causing it, and resilience. And I think for Indigenous peoples, we are systems thinkers, and we're not political thinkers that just talk about it. We decide a plan and we take it into action, which really means that a lot of the climate work that is happening on our communities is just happening. It's not resourced in the way that it should be. And so I want to throw it open to you, like when you think about the idea of nation building, you think about the idea of investing in Indigenous economies, there is $11 million a year that goes into fossil fuel subsidies. Just a question to the crowd, but what would you invest that in? What would that look like as an investment or partial investment into your communities in terms of development? Whoever wants to start. And also, I'll go to questions from the floor as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, thanks, Rhys. How I'd like it to be used is just accepting that we have a master key as First Nations people to a solution here. And that to accept that if we were given the opportunity to just lead from our connection to the earth, because this is about the peril of the earth, that we have a solution. It's a blueprint that our cultures have been based on for time immemorial. We have never diverted away from that blueprint. That blueprint has only been severed from us. And what I try to say, and I said at the last session we just had, and everywhere I go, this thing about us and them, that kind of thinking has to stop, because if my ancestor, with that knowledge that about that connectedness, came to talk to your ancestor, whether it's 2 generations away or 10 generations down from wherever your bloodline goes, you have a First Nations ancestor somewhere. If those two sat together and talked, they would be talking the same language, they'd be talking the same message, and they would be saying, connect and heal the earth to my blueprint. The colonial legacy, capitalism, has disrupted that blueprint. It is in our DNA, in our metaphysics, physically within us. And I wanted to touch on what you said, Amber, in that I know for a fact when my people are sick, and I've heard that, you know, in your countries it's the same. When you are sick, you just want to go home to country because you know what? Just to sit in it is healing. That's huge. This is the connection that we have. For all the people that are separated and detached from their lands, no wonder there's problems. You don't have the A-grade connection. Wouldn't you want the A-grade connection? Everyone's dealing in the Z, past beyond the Z connection. People need to connect. Connect to yourself first. Check where you're at. Check where your ancestor is, and then check to the earth.
Yeah, we need to go home. The answer is us. We all know that. No one knows my country, and not any other Aboriginal person in this group knows my country as better than I do. And I don't know your country. So we're the only ones that do know what's going on within our country, and we are the answer to the solution. One of the things that I'll just come back to where I'm fighting against Santos. Santos has now employed, they have not employed, but they wanted to go into our Aboriginal cultural, not Aboriginal culture, our Aboriginal sporting events now. And 2 months ago, they wanted to go in and sponsor 170 Aboriginal football teams in my country where we've already told them to go. And this is bringing them into the table with us. But our group within Gummeroy has told them they have to go. So when we did that protest 3 weeks ago, they've come back again now with land agreements for pipelines. And this is all going on before the 25th of November, when the final court case comes down, because Gummeroy people said no to Santos and told them to go. So there is Aboriginal groups in Australia that says no to mining. No matter what the government tells you, we do say no, and we do want to protect our country. I just want to let you know that on the 25th of November is the day that we are going to finally kick Santos right out of our country.
Just in regards to the subsidies and where I want to see the funds go, you know, what has happened in Australia is assimilation policies for our people, and that continues to happen. Identified positions within colonial businesses that keeps us off country, and not only that, convinces our children that somehow the proximity to colonial capitalist mindset is success. Well, we all know that that's an illusion. So I would love to see job opportunities for our people on the ground, wages, being able to get paid to be back on country, and outside of this colonial concept that our people don't work with. The reason that we have 60,000+ years of knowledge is because we sat with country, we sat with elders, we weren't in offices, we weren't in these big systems that basically crunch us up and make us time poor and make us leave our cultural spaces because we are being told that we are lesser than if we are connected to country, or we are lesser than in our cultural ways, and we don't get the appropriate funds to be able to live in the livelihood if we do choose culture and community. So we need the Australian government to back us and realise that this idea that Aboriginal people are lazy is absolute you know, and that actually that is embedded in us being able to be in relationship with our more than human kin, country and culture.
Damn. How do I follow that? I would love to. So with jobs and being able to work on country, I want to see a bigger, broader economy that allows for those jobs to not be dependent on government funding. Because at the moment, funding for rangers is limited. It doesn't work at all with the seasons that rangers work in. And there's very limited pathways for growth. So I want to see fundamental, true systems, economic reform in a way that allows for our cultural practices, which, as you've heard from everyone here, and any blackfellow or any Indigenous person can tell you, is the solution. It's because our practices are natural, inherent adaptation and mitigation responses. So we need to be leading and shaping economies, new markets that are not extractive of country, that are in relationship with country. Because if we do not change in that way to relationship, as everyone here has been talking about, it's going to get worse. Our ancestors, have lived and walked and breathed and loved on a land for 65,000 years. And I said this before in the yarning, can we truly look at each other in the eye and know that we're going to be here for another 65,000 years in a way that respects life, in a way that supports quality and equity of life? I really want that future, and I'm sure everyone here does too. But we have to shift away from, firstly holding these fossil fuel companies to account who are degrading the entire planetary systems that we live in. And I'm hoping, I'm trying to think of like new theories of my research, but I'm hoping that like shifting these current, like what holds the government, what's more powerful than government? And my working theory, again, I don't know finance like at all, but I am thinking that like market transformation in a way that is relational and supportive could maybe, I don't know, someone here can probably figure it out quicker than me, but we got to hold them to account, and we have to step more into our relationships.
One of the things that we can hold them accountable is our government, our Aboriginal workers that are working in there. They are dictating some of the stuff for us, and they should not be doing it. They should not be talking on our behalf. Public servant blackfellas are in there that are talking for us and not coming home to country. They have to stop that. I've had enough of it. We've had enough. Stop it.
I think it's an incredibly important point as well, like the idea around, you know, how you express your indigeneity or as an Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander person. But, you know, Auntie Mary Graham talks about basically the autonomous regard that we have for the obligation to our culture. And I think a lot of people forget that in colonial systems. They're like, oh, we've got an Aboriginal person here, but is that person connected to that accountability system? Like, we embrace that, and this is the piece of it, right? If every white fella, you know, that was making decisions about destroying our country since the Industrial Revolution had an obligation to country like we do. I was talking to someone the other day, and there's this whole piece of research around, you know, Gen Z and their mental health, and they've talked about this idea of like a third place. Like, people go from home to work and there's nothing else. I'm like, well, that's only for white fellas, because we have our place, and our place is country, and we know that, you know, we belong to country. Country, you know, in the idea of understanding, like, we don't own country, country owns us, and that's part of the obligation piece there. I want to open to the floor for a question or two, if anyone has one. But I also might, Jason's got one up the back. Of course, Jason got a question. Run the mic up. Do you just want to introduce yourself as well?
Jason Field, Wabunja Bidjigal, and with the Climate Action Network. I just wanted to pick up on Arnie Polly's point about the answer is us, and in that theme, what's preventing us from developing our own NDCs?
Absolutely nothing. Does someone want to respond to that?
No, let's get started.
You know, this is a piece. We are sovereign people. Like, The states have this obligation to bring them forward, but this is, I guess, an initiative that is led by Indigenous peoples. Like, we're going to develop them ourselves. We're going to bring them out to philanthropy. We're going to bring them out to the government. We're going to show them to NGOs and say, this is what we want to do, and we want you to back them. And also to say, it's not going to be one size fits all. Like, that's a government approach. We are hundreds of different nations, hundreds of different cultures, and what we want to do in the lead up to COP is start a conversation around not just thinking about one protected species, not just thinking about fire management in this biome, but actually holistically what is land management and what type of investment does it need, but also what does this mean for nation building? What does it mean for the ability for us, because this is what it's all about, to remain on country. Any other questions? Otherwise, I will go one last question from me, which is, maybe this week there will be an announcement that Australia will host COP31. Maybe. What are your hopes and expectations for that COP? For it to be an Indigenous COP?
Well, first up, I would like us to be speaking with the South Australian people first up and ask them, do they want us there? You know, we haven't even asked that question as an Aboriginal person. I don't know if they are ready for us or even know that it's coming. So, you know, that's one of the things that I'd like to know. Yeah. And I think that they should be, I don't know if there's anyone here from South Australia?
There was someone here.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's the answer there. So the answer is us.
I think one of the other things to say, and this is probably a good platform to say it on, is like everyone's talking about Adelaide or Ghana country, but to remember its name is Tandanya, and Tandanya is a meeting place of many songlines. And so one of the messages that we have from Mob from across South Australia is that it is many people's country and many people's meeting place spiritually and culturally, and that people want to respect that as well within the understanding of what is Adelaide. Adelaide is a colonial city, but that this place has a deeper meaning to local peoples who absolutely are still thinking about what it means for their country and how they're involved in it as well.
I just want to say that I think the reason that we also end up in this situation with climate is because we've forgotten the number one law of not just our lands but all lands, which is that you are to not think you are better than anything, not country, not another human, and not more than human kin. And the fact that we've forgotten that is the reason that people have been able to destroy and colonize all over this globe. So it's our responsibility, not just as Indigenous people, but for everybody to remember, don't pedestal yourself. Bring your ego down, come back and realize that the ant and the plant are exactly the same as you. You are not better or greater than. My hope for Adelaide is that we have the Australian government back us for some kind of Indigenous gathering pre that, so that we can educate our people on exactly what we need to do in that space. I want to see mass majority of Indigenous people at that COP, and also I want to see a COP that looks sustainable, one where potentially we have reusable cups, one where we potentially aren't using huge of resources to run something for 2 or 3 weeks, one where we're not destroying forests and kicking people out of their cities in order for us to meet to talk about how we're going to solve climate. Because for me, somehow that seems a little bit contradictory.
How is Australia going to show up? So on the back of this appeal that's about to start, and also a shout out to people in our brothers and sisters from the Pacific and the recent ICJ ruling in The Hague, what I would like to do is to see the Australian government say how they show up in the context of what we are saying to them, and in relation to their participation in further peril to the earth through gas and oil being exported. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that frame, looking forward to how we are as a country going to show up in amongst all of that, and our government is hosting that, so that's a huge question for them to address in the spotlight in very short time, 12 months, if we do get COP next year.
I want to see redress for past harm, particularly through extractive industries, which is one of the main drivers of why we're in this mess. I want to see capacity and capability building for Mob to engage in country-based economies that support our relationship and support a better climate country future. And blackfellas mob Indigenous peoples in positions of leadership rather than as participatory, subsurface level, yeah, they're important, we respect them, but that's it. It's all words. I want to see action, and I want to see structural shifts within a place that we know is not designed for us. It's not designed by us. And so we know we're going to show up, but how are you, that's my question to the government, how are you going to show up, wherever they are, how are you going to show up for us? Because we are the caretakers and the stewards of the lands that you also live on. So,
Where will they place us? And where will they place us in amongst this?
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think that if anyone's seen the climate risk report that came out this year, it was pretty devastating just a couple of months ago. And I think if you're really serious about it, what it says to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities across Australia is get ready to leave. And we, as First Peoples of this land, have the right to remain. We have the right to our country. And so we need to see more ambition from the Australian government. We need to see a plan. We're not asking you to turn off fossil fuels tomorrow. We know that can't happen, but there has to be a phase out. It's not just from us, it's from our relatives in the Pacific as well. We want to remain on country. I know that we have the call from across the Pacific that they're not drowning, they are fighting, and we need to continue to fight as a region. Australia is the largest island in the Pacific, and I want to see it take that place with the most ambition and the most responsibility and show up with a real plan to get to 1.5. Thank you, everyone. Oh, we're going to get a photo. Also, any mob that are here, we're going to have some snacks and just a hello in there's a rooms for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people just around the corner. So we're going to take a photo first. Yeah? Do you want to mob up here?